Welcome everyone to ChessWhiz TV episode 30. Today is June 24th, 2014, and today we are doing lessons on the opening as you saw in the title of the broadcast. Now this is key, lessons, because a couple episodes ago, episode 24 I think, we did the road to improvement, and that was the road to my improvement. The goal here was to improve the skills of ChessWhiz. Today is not so. Lessons on the opening is for the viewer, and I'm pointing right at you, viewer. These are for you. So if you're improving, the goal is being met. If I'm improving, we're wasting our time. If you're just watching, we're wasting our time. You need to be improving at chess. So that's the goal here. If you're already better than I am, you should probably just turn off the stream unless you like dumb jokes, because you're not going to improve beyond me. That's one interesting thing about chess and most competitive games. If you play people worse than you, it's really hard to improve. You have to play people and be interacting with people better than you. So that being said, if you're not better than me, good. Actually, most people aren't better than me. Let's throw that on the screen. Here we are on lichess.org. Let's go to my profile over here. I'm ChessWhiz, and what you can see, this little trophy up here in the corner, top 1% player. That means 99% of people are not better than me, roughly speaking. Now it's actually way more than that, because these are only the people who play online and have accounts here. A lot of the people on lichess.org play anonymously. They don't have accounts, so they don't have ratings. That's a good thing, but those guys aren't better than me either. So 99% means there's quite an audience here that can learn something about the opening. That's a good thing. So what can we learn about the opening? You guys ready to start? You guys ready to start? Once we start, there's no going back. There's no undo button on starting. Let's start. So I've got a board editor over here, and it looks all weird, but then I've got the cool view. Cool view is back. So there's ChessWhiz TV up there, there's the schedule down there, and there's this beautiful chessboard right there, which is backwards for me, because that's my right side, and I'm pointing to a weird side. So let's talk about the opening. The first thing you guys need to know about the opening is it comes at the beginning of the chess game. You can't start with the ending. Wow, this is profound. I'm so glad I'm tuned into ChessWhiz TV so I can learn that the opening comes first. Fantastic. So what about this chessboard here? What do you notice about it? Well, there's some squares in the middle, d4, e4, d5, f5. These are important squares. Oh, and e5. That's good. This is f5 over here. Important squares to the chessboard. Why? Because they kind of are near all the other squares. If you look at a6 over here, it's near these squares. It's not near these squares. But the center squares are near every single square. Okay, maybe not h1, but just about every square. That's important because you want to be near everything so that you're ready to react. If the opponent's attacking on the king side, you want to be near the king side to defend. If you want to go attack on the king side, you want to be near the king side. But what about play on the queen side? From the center, you can play everywhere. From the side, not so much. So if the center's open, you want to be there. If the center's really, really closed up by pawns, I'm sure you guys have played a couple games like this, where the pawns are just locked up like this, and it's like, how do I even do anything in this chess position? Well, you don't. You have to go around the center. So in a position like this, the center isn't so key, and you have to go around to the sides of the board. But most chess games, I would say more than half, have more open positions that don't have locked up pawns like this. So this is definitely control the center. Control the center. I got a message on chat says I know where you live, and you live in a great place. Why, thank you very much, except I'm allergic to the air around here because of grass pollen allergies, so maybe I should move, but for now I'm not moving. Well, let's get back to the chess. So what's the point in the opening? Well, controlling the center is one thing, but there's more than that. See all these pieces down here? This is like your team. Like, imagine a game of soccer, since we've got the World Cup going on, a game of football, and this is your whole team. So if you decide to go out with your star player, now I don't know any names of soccer players because I'm lame, but let's say that this is your star player right here. So you're like, I'm going to attack. Boom! In this example, I'm white and I'm attacking. I'm going to make a goal with my star player. This is great. I take on a e5. Perfect. So black says, your star player is coming out. Boom. I'll attack it. Problems. So look at this. Fantastic for white. White's winning. This happens in beginner games, and it's bad. Bad. This is sign language for bad. Very bad. Don't do it. It also means cut off his head. So the king is in check, and the rook is going down. Bishop e7 to block, or knight e7 to block, or queen e7 to block. Boom. The rook goes. So here's a possible line. Rook goes. Black is able to take here, but it's not good enough. White blocks the check. This pawn's still guarded. This is only one pawn. It's not as good as a rook. So white ended up way ahead. Yes! So this is what happens at beginner games. And white says, that's what I'm doing next game. I'm going out with my queen, and I'm going to go take all his pieces. Well, it's not a good plan. Why not? Let's take a look. It's because I got to put all this back one by one. Where's this? Oh, I'm in the wrong view. Big chessboard view. There we go. There we go. Okay, so why don't we just fight with the queen only? E4, E5, queen H5. Well, black can just be a little bit more sane and say, well, my pawn's under attack, better defend that. Also, I want to bring out my whole team, my whole army here at knight c6. This defends the pawn. You've seen knight moves like this. Now the queen looks kind of silly out here, right? I mean, she's not attacking anything, and she's way out on the side of the board. So don't bring out your queen early, and we're going to see why. So white says, of course, I want to do a checkmate down here. So bishop c4. This is called the scholar's mate. It's fantastic, fantastic way to beat bad players. Bad way to beat anybody who knows what they're doing. If black does not know what they're doing, they'll say, oh, that queen, I'll attack it. And they play knight f6 and checkmate. White says, yes, I'm playing like this from now on. Wrong. Cut, stop, right? This is bad. Why is it bad? Because if black plays a little bit better, white's wasting his time. So obviously knight f6 is bad. We need to protect here. But what about g6? It also protects here. The queen moves to attack that pawn again, and now black can bring out his pieces and stop the checkmate at the same time. So white didn't get a checkmate. His queen is still out there attacking. What can he do? Well, let's say he wants to bring out his queen some more and threaten f7 again. Can black stop this? It's kind of hard to guard f7 now. Protect the pawn here. Now what's white doing? There's no attacks. So white's attack is stopped. Now how many pieces has black got brought out? 3 pieces. And white has brought out 2. So white's fallen behind in bringing out his pieces. Now that gets back to the main point. The point of the opening is to bring out your pieces, and that does not mean your queen. So I know everybody knows this because you're all elite chess players who are online. The non-elite chess players are not online. But I've got to reiterate this to you because some people don't know this. Don't fight with your queen early. It gets kicked around and you get time wasted. So queen h5, bad move. Queen f3, f2, bad move. Knight f3, good. This is not a queen. The problem is queen doesn't really want to trade for anything. Trade your queen for a pawn, bad trade. For a knight, bad trade. So if anything attacks that queen, let's look at this line again. Let's say white's a little more sane and black goes here. If anything attacks this queen, you cannot just leave it there. You cannot say, oh, I'll trade my queen for that thing that's attacking it. You have to get her out of the way. So she ends up moving over and over and over, and that is wasteful. Take a look at this other opening over here. It's called the center counter defense, also known as the Scandinavian. White plays e4, black plays d5. This is a popular opening. It was played by Viswanathan Anand a long time ago in 1995 against Garry Kasparov. So queen takes d5. Now the queen is out. Now this is not that good. Black plays this because it kind of neutralizes white's center. White had a strong pawn, and now there's no pawns here. We talked about the center. But white plays knight c3, bringing out a piece while attacking the queen. Now the queen has to move. So black spends time moving his queen around instead of doing cool things like bringing out his pieces. That would be the cool thing to do. So this opening is actually played by top-level players. They do like this because at least it neutralizes the center. But in theory, opening theory would say this is a waste of time for black. Now, queen d8 is possible, queen a5 is possible. This one's more common. But black spent 2 moves, so he's a little bit further behind in development. This is an okay position for black, but white is better. White has better results. If you don't believe me, let's take a look. Who has better results here? Who has better results here? Since we are just winging it today, let's go find out. Center, counter. Who has better results? I love Google searches these days because you can just type anything and it searches. It used to be you had to use all the keywords. Wait, where am I? There I am. All the keywords, you had to use them. But now you just type your question. Who has better results? And it answers right away. Would you like the Scandinavian defense or would you like professional teeth whitening? I can give you either one because I'm Google. Well, in this case, it's Scandinavian defense, blah, blah. Here's all the information about that opening. Here it is. It's in B01 of the Encyclopedia of Chess Openings, blah, blah, blah. See also, so you can learn about this opening. If you want to learn about the Scandinavian, which I know is the center counter because it used to be called that. Blah, 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 blah. It doesn't say who does better, but I'll tell you white does. Why? Because white does better in chess. So let's get back to the board editor and view. Whoa, ChessWhiz just jumped on the screen kind of scary-like right there. There we go. Okay, let's go back to the starting position. So now we know we need to bring out the pieces. This is simple stuff, guys. Everyone should know this. Bring out your pieces in the opening. But it's like a race, actually. It's like a race to bring out your pieces. So if white is like, okay, e4, e5, now I really hate it. Knight f3, knight c6, this is normal stuff, bringing out a couple pieces. White says, I really hate it when black gets his bishop down here. I really hate it when this knight is pinned, because I can't move anywhere or I lose my queen. He probably had a game where he was like, I'm going to go attack, and he was like, he lost his queen. Ouch. So white says, I'm never going to let that happen again. So he plays h3. This move stops the pin. You see this in a lot of beginner games, white or black, pushing this pawn on the rook side to stop pins. This is generally a bad idea. Every now and then you have a position where it's okay to do, or even good. But usually, if you're just thinking, oh, I want to stop the pin, you're probably wasting your time. You're probably wasting your move stopping the pin, because you're not bringing out pieces. You're not developing your position. So the rule for pawns is you may move pawns in the opening. Otherwise, you really couldn't move your bishops. Hold on, there's a water break. You hear that loud gulping sound? That's ChessWhiz drinking water. Now it's camera adjustment time. Perfect. Perfect. I got to slouch a little bit, but that's okay. I do that naturally. You may move pawns in the opening, as I was saying, but they have to be related to the development of your pieces, and preferably to the controlling the center. So you might see this opening as well, where you're bringing out your pieces, but you're not really controlling the center. White starts with 1 g3. Is this a good move? It's debatable. Okay, so white's getting his bishop out to the side on this long diagonal. This is called a fianchetto, also called a fianchetto. We could argue all day about how to pronounce that. But meanwhile, he's not attacking the center directly. So this is a more modern approach to playing chess, where you give up the center immediately, but then attack it later in the game. So meanwhile, black might play d5 at c5, and knight c6, and white plays knight f3 in castles, and black plays knight f6. So what kind of position is this? Well, white has no stake in the center, and he's developing kind of slowly because he's made a side pawn move. But he does have a nice, cool shape. I mean, is this a cool shape or what? This 3x3 right here, I'd put that on my shirt. Maybe I should, because this is a nice shape of pieces. By the way, a pawn is not blocking this bishop. This is important. For a fianchetto, because it's a knight, you don't even care. Knights move in one move. Watch this. The knight moved. Okay, so now let's say a pawn is blocking it. Lame. Is that pawn going to move? It's a lot harder to move pawns, actually, than knights. Here's why. You move them forward, and they can't move backward. Oh, this is not legal, so you can't just do this all day. No, once you've done this, it doesn't go back. So if your bishop's blocked by a pawn, serious business. But if it's blocked by a knight, don't even worry. Just let that knight sit there for as long as you please. You can move it sometime when it's tactically beneficial. But that's an important thing to consider. If you're inventing the fianchetto, you're like, well, my bishop's over here, it's going to be great, but it's blocked by a knight. Don't even worry. It's still okay. Just don't block your bishops by pawns, because pawns are not so movable as knights. So that side development is a little slow, but you're still hitting the center. So that's like the gray area of developing your pieces. The pawn move, I mean, you were moving a pawn on the side of the board, but at least you were helping your pieces out. So it's like a trade-off. Now, there's so much analysis that's gone into the opening, because you can just look at this position right here. People have looked at this for a long time and just crunch this in a computer. Crunch, 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 and make up books and lines and theories about all these moves. So a lot is known about the opening already. So moves like this are not new. In fact, they're very old, and they've been analyzed to death. I mean to death. So I'm not here to tell you what I don't know about this. I'm just giving you general guidelines, and that it's more popular, and therefore probably better, to strike out in the center immediately with a move like e4. Would you like to know what's more popular, e4 or g3? Let's ask the Goog. There I am. Google, what's more popular, e4 or g3? Say, you can just ask the question. You see how it says Google comment? You can actually type that. And then it's like, let me help you. Here's the Dutch defense. Here's Note Frequency's 7th string software. Here's a wind controller. Or would you like Glasgow Zoopla? See, Google is very useful. We should definitely get more Google on the stream. Goodbye, ChessWhiz TV. I mean, ChessWhiz. TV's staying. ChessWhiz is gone. Wow, thank you, Google, for that insight. So I'll just have to tell you, because Google didn't seem to know, that e4 is more popular than g3. Where's that cool chessboard view? There it is. I like this one better. Water. Here's one reason I like it better. It doesn't have all the space that's not chess. Chess is the important thing here. So not chess, not important. Very, very clear. Hello to everyone in chat who's saying hello. Hello to you. By the way, we've got some stats in the chat. Just going back a little bit, we got some help from Lai Chesser, who's named after this website. E4, D5 takes, knight C3, queen A5. Who's better in this position? I asked you, and then I couldn't find any stats because Google wanted to give us teeth whitening. The answer is white wins 55%. That's amazing, by the way, because chess can have ties in it. You can be playing all day and then nobody wins. That's kind of a flaw in chess, but it's not going to be fixed because chess is called legacy software. It's not getting a lot of updates. So after queen a5, white wins more often. Duh, white moved first. But in reality, this is a better position for white. In theory and in reality. But also in reality, black still plays it because he has to play something. He moved second. He's got to take some kind of small disadvantage for that. So move your pawns, but focus on bringing out your pieces when you do it. Okay? So e4, it's good because it allows the knight out. e5, knight f3, knight c6. Bishop c4. Let's just play something quiet. Now what about d3 here? What do you think? Moving a second pawn, is that good? I can't wait for you to answer in chat because that's going to be 20 seconds. So I'll just give you the answer. Yes, well, yes and no. The answer is theory says c3 is better, and that's because you're striking at the center right away. Now c3 looks dumb because you're blocking the spot for your knight. Whoa, my knight just took my own pawn. Got to be careful with that. Okay, so c3 is better in practice. The book says we analyze this position and c3 is better, but that's not the point. The point is we're moving the pawns to assist the piece development and to control the center. So c3 here prepares, that's what I'm looking for, d4. If you're not going to play d4, then you're the dumbest guy ever playing c3 because you're blocking your own square for the knight. But after d4, some trades occur, the knight can come in, the bishop can come in, and it turns out okay. But let's say you didn't know all that and you played d3. You're doing fine in this position. In fact, you're still at least equal, probably slightly better against black, who's moving second, even after d3. Because you're allowing your other bishop to move out, you're strengthening your center. So this is a good move. Now h3, not so much. And now you guys know why. You're not focusing on the center. You're not focusing on bringing out your pieces. So with h3, well, it's now black's turn, and he can bring out a piece. He can play knight f6. Now your pawn is under attack, so you have to defend it. So now d3. But now it's black's turn. Black got the upper hand. He has the tempo. The bishop doesn't have to go here. The bishop could go over here instead. Challenge this trade. So h3, waste of time. d3, just a fine move indeed. So you can move your pawns if you're focusing on the center and you're bringing your pieces out. But don't just move your pawns because it's like, well, I got to bring out my pawns right. No, the point of the pawns is to assist the piece development and to assist the center. Did you know that a pawn is not a piece? This comes as a shock to people. I tell them, oh, a pawn, that's not a piece, that's a pawn. And they're like, what? That's a piece? I mean, I'm holding it in my hand. No, it's not. There's two things in chess. There's pieces and there's pawns. In fact, it's so true that people will say, I lost a piece for a pawn. Now that sounds like, well, that was a trade, right? No, because a piece in that case would be a knight or a bishop, which is also known as a minor piece. So you've lost 2 points of chess material. If you don't know, a pawn is 1 point because you got to measure by something. Knight or bishop is 3 points. People usually prefer bishops, but not by a whole point, which would be by a whole pawn. Rook is 5 and a queen is 9. So don't trade your queen for any of those other things. They're not much good. So anyway, losing a piece for a pawn would be losing 2 points of material. That's huge. That's not like 2 points in basketball. That's like 2 points in soccer, aka football, which is the whole game. You play for 90 minutes and you got 2 points. And it's like, yes, I got 2 points. I'm amazing. That's what chess is like. If you can get ahead 2 points, then you're way, way ahead. So a piece for a pawn is a significant advantage. So when you're bringing out your pieces, that does not mean you're bringing out your pawn. So if I tell you, bring out your pieces, it is not, okay, g4, g5, now I'm bringing out my pieces. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Okay. So pawn move here. Good. Let's move on to something new. Something new. So the goal of the opening is to get ahead in development. It's like a race. Imagine that you're in a race with your opponent. And this is interesting race because in chess, you're trying to checkmate the opponent, right? Nobody ever won a chess game because they brought out all their pieces and the opponent was like, oh, you brought all out your pieces first. I resign. Which is, by the way, giving up the game. It's not I surrender or I forfeit. Don't say I forfeit if you're giving up your chess game. because that would mean you didn't come to the board. If you sit down in a tournament and you start the opponent's clock and their clock runs for an hour and they don't show up, they forfeited. If they sit down across you, they tip their king over and they say, I don't want to play you because your rating's 1,000,000, they resigned. So that's an important difference there. So no one ever resigned because the opponent brought their pieces out first. They usually resign because they're about to get checkmated, or maybe they just lost their queen for a pawn. Happens more than you'd think. However, even though the goal is to checkmate, the goal of the opening is not to checkmate. If you're checkmating in the opening, you're doing something wrong. And what you're doing wrong is you're playing dumb people. That's what you're doing wrong. I mean, seriously, checkmating in the opening, the opponent made a mistake. So don't even try. Don't even be like e4, queen h5, I'm going to go checkmate you. It's not going to work. The opponent can defend, and you're racing toward the wrong thing. So in the opening, you actually race toward bringing out your pieces. So let me show you. Oh, I got a question in chat. Where's episode 29? It's not on the YouTube profile. I'm sorry, Ragritz. I'm going to be uploading that shortly. Episode 29 is in my computer and nowhere else. So I will share that with you soon. That being said, it's a race to bring out your pieces. Where was I? Where was I indeed? So let me show you how you do that. E4, E5. Now, what I mean by pieces here is knights and bishops first, because if they trade with another piece, that's okay. They're trading with another knight or bishop, or they're trading with a rook. That's a pretty good trade. Okay, so knight, knight, bishop. This is called the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish game. It's a very good opening. You're bringing out your knights, you're bringing out your bishops. Do that first, but let's do this one because it's nice and quiet. And let's say white just plays d3 because he doesn't know about the cool c3 move. Knight f6, white castles. By the way, guys, always castle in the opening. Let me show you how castling works in case you're playing over the board. Let me get all this stuff out of the way. King moves 2 squares toward the rook, and the rook comes back to where the king was. I see people sometimes over the board move their king all the way over here because it looks right, but it's wrong. The king has to move 2 squares toward the rook. Fortunately, when you're online, the computer won't let you cheat. I mean, it'll just do this for you. But the king has to move 2 squares toward the rook. Let's not talk about chess 960, aka Fischer random chess, because that's not the topic of this discussion. By the way, if the king moves through check, that's not allowed, so you can't castle if this square is under attack. But if the rook moves through check, you're allowed. And very strong players have actually been like, tournament director, he can't castle here because b1 was under check. I mean, let's say this knight was here. White can still castle here. He can still go like this. This is legal. And some, even strong players, although it's not very common, don't know that. And so they think, well, if I guard b1, he won't be able to castle. Not true. So anyway, castle every game, and usually castle kingside. There's an obvious reason to castle kingside, which is you can get it done faster. You're racing in the opening to bring out all your pieces. Well, let's count out the pieces. Over here on the king side, you need to bring out your knight and bishop, and you're done. On the queen side, knight and bishop and queen. And who wants to move their queen in the opening? Not you, because you just watched this episode. So you don't really want to castle queenside. It's slower and worse. Now, there's some openings, some positions where you end up castling queenside, and that's the right thing to do. But it's pretty uncommon. I mean, I would say 90% of the time, castle kingside. 90%. That's pretty high. So just in general, do it. Now, if your opponent castles on the other side as you, watch out because someone's going to attack someone. But that's the topic of another episode as well. Okay. So, castle. Of course, because I just told you to. Black also castles. White had already played d3, so e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, castles, knight f6, d3, and black castles. Black's turn now. He copies white. Now, this is one of the strange positions where you can just keep on copying your opponent like a Xerox machine, and you're doing okay. So what happens now? It's white's turn. He needs to bring out a few more pieces. How about knight here? Whoa, we cheated because this is completely symmetrical. It should still be white's turn. So it is. I say so. White's turn right now. Bishop has a couple of choices to move to. Let's say it pins this knight. Why not? Let's say this bishop pins this knight. Completely symmetrical. Is the development done? This is a multiple choice question. Your options are yes, no, I don't know, maybe, or why am I watching ChessWhiz TV? The answer is E! Why am I watching ChessWhiz TV? No, I was just kidding on that one. It's not. The answer is actually B. No. No, development is not done. Why not? Why isn't development done? You brought out all your pieces, you've castled, there's more to do, and that is having to do with the queen and rooks. Now it comes at this point, it comes after your knights and bishops are out, that you start thinking about your queens and rooks. And this is important because let me just duplicate this tab, and then I'm back in a new position. Watch this. Whoa, see what I did there? Whoa, that's pretty cool. Okay, so now we're back to the starting position. Some people say rooks are so good, gotta bring them rooks out. So they're like, okay, here comes my rooks. Now there's a couple of problems with this. First of all, you're not controlling the center, so you're violating rule B, which I told you at the beginning of the cast. We start with B because B is awesome. Second problem is rooks get cooked around. They get kicked around the same way that queens do because they're too valuable. So let's say white says, black, in this case, says you're being dumb, I'm taking the center. White says, I'm bringing out my rooks. Now, you guys have not even seen a position this lame. Maybe you have, because some people think they need to bring out their rooks this way. This is horrible, horrible, horrible. And the only people who do this invented it themselves because they never read a chess book in their life. Okay, so e5, black takes the center and immediately attacks the rook. And now you see the problem with bringing out valuable pieces first. White cannot afford to trade a rook for a bishop. That's a loss of 2 points, which is an entire game of soccer, aka football, and that's bad. That's a loss right there. If black takes this rook in a good game, high quality players, it's over. White could just resign, not forfeit, but resign this position. So white needs to save the rook. Now he's not going to go back here. He's really going to have to admit that he's an idiot, so he has to move somewhere else. He can't go here. So look at this horrible, ungainly position. The rook is in the way of the pawns that need to be controlling the center. It's in the way of the bishops that are in the way of the pawn. The rook is blocking the pawns, it's blocking the bishops. This is bad, bad, bad. Plus, the rook can get kicked around more. Anytime black chooses, he can play d4. Shouldn't happen right away because this center is really strong. He should just bring out his pieces. He could bring out his knight or his bishop to cover e5, and it's not a problem. This rook is really being lame. Don't bring your rooks first. Duh, right? You don't see a lot of games with the rook first, but it's important to not do. So if you're bringing out your rooks and thinking about your rooks, stop thinking about your rooks. It's a similar mistake to thinking about your queen. So, back to this position, we've got knights and bishops out. We're castled. Now is the time. Now is when you think about your rooks and your queen. So it's control the center with the pawn. It's get your knights and bishops out and castle during that time. And then you think about the rooks and queens. So what do we think about them? Okay, I'm thinking about my rooks and queens. They're great. I still have them, and I'm going to checkmate him with them. Here's what you do with your queen. Get it off the back rank. You see the queen here? This is sign language. Forget the queen off. See the queen on d1 here? That's bad for the queen. Queen on e2, queen on d2, that's good for the queen. Now, in this specific position, there could be problems because you've got a pin here. So if queen e2, we've got knight d4. Queen's under attack. Knight can't take it because the knight is pinned. So there's some tactical problems. And if queen d2, black could choose to trade his bishop for the knight, which would double these pawns. Pawn structure is a topic of another episode, but basically if you've got two pawns stacked up like this, that's worse, and if they're side by side, that's better. Okay, so get it off the back rank. We're going to ignore the fact that black could do this or knight in the other case. Anywhere off the back rank is considered developing. Anywhere. So queen c2 if there weren't a pawn there, queen f3, queen d3, queen e3, anywhere that's not blocking the rooks. Because the rooks, imagine that they have walkie-talkies and that the reception is only good if they're in line of sight. So this super tall queen here, and it's like all static. Do you read me, rook f1? Do you read me? I do not read you. Actually, no one would say I do not read you because they wouldn't hear the question. So why do you even ask if they read you? It's kind of like saying, are you asleep? Are you asleep? Tell me, are you asleep? Are you asleep? Well, are you? Are you asleep? Are you asleep now? They're not going to answer. So do you read me is kind of a dumb question, but let's not get too deep into that. We wasted enough time. So the queen moves off the back. Now the rooks can communicate. Rook a1, rook f1, say, I'm guarding you, man. I've got your back, or in this case, your side, because rooks only really have sides, not fronts or backs. This is considered developing, so get that done. Black does the same thing. Now we've got this doubling pawns issue, but just ignore that. Now where do the rooks go? People like their rooks to be potent, to be powerful, to be effective, because rooks are worth 5 points, man. They're way better than a bishop. But actually, in the opening with all these pieces on the board, sometimes they don't really get to shine, because their power is in moving all the way across the board in one move. I mean, you can go from e1 to e7, d1 to d7, go checkmate him in 3 moves. You do not do that with knights. Because it takes them several moves to get across the board. So rooks are powerful, but when there's all these pieces on the board, not so much. So where do you put them? You have to plan ahead in this case. I mean, in this position, there's no clear spot. So you have to think, where are the open files going to be? Now, for all you non-techie people, a file is a line or a column on the chessboard. So this is the D file right here. This is the E file. I'm calling them files from now on. In earlier episodes, I was like, what if they don't know what a file is? I better call it a line. But then I sounded dumb because nobody calls them lines. They call them files. So these are files, these vertical lines. And these right here, you might call them rows. Wrong. They're ranks. So it's like, oh, the 5th rank. That's what you should say, and not the 5th row. Then you would sound like a fish. A tooth whitening fish. By the way, I wonder if fish have teeth. There's only one way to find out. Do fish have teeth? The top answer is, did you see that autocomplete there? Google was like, did you want to know if fish have ears, brains, tongues? And I saw feelings flash on the screen, which was interesting. Yahoo Answers is going to tell us. This may come as a surprise to you. Fish do have teeth. Depends on the fish. Wow, you can learn so much on ChessWhiz TV. Some fish have teeth. And so they should use that link for tooth whitening. I've never heard of a fish using tooth whitening, but that's because fish aren't very smart. So let's get these rooks to the open lines. You have to plan ahead. Plan where the lines are going to open. So in this case, all the lines are closed. You know, there's a lot of pieces on the board. I mean files, not lines. So all the pieces are on the board. So where are they going to be? Think about the files as the pawns. This is key right here. I mean, imagine if these F pawns weren't here. It becomes obvious to a strong player that this is an open file because there's no pawns on it. That's actually the key. The knight can move. In one move, the knight is gone. Okay, in one move, is this pawn gone? No, this pawn ain't never going nowhere. So let's click clear board. That's actually what I'm talking about by an open file. So here's the pawn position. You need to be looking for the open files according to pawns. So let's take a look at a pawn structure after Sicilian, which is e4, c5. This is the Sicilian opening. Knight f3, knight c6, d4, pawn takes, knight takes pawn. So this pawn dies. See you in heaven. Open files are obviously d file for white and c file for black. Now in this case, the two players have different files. I mean, white has the D and black has the C, so they have different ones. So it's tough to choose. Well, which one do you take? You take your own or your opponent's. You favor your own, and this is called a semi-open file, where one player has no pawn on it, but the other player does. A fully open file would be no pawns at all, like the D file here, and a closed file is if both players have pawns. So go for the open files. And here white would probably put his rooks on d1 and e1 because this actually has a potential to open. And black might put a rook on c8 to hit down here, and then the other one could be on d8 to help prepare for d5. Or he could double them up. He could put them both like this. That doesn't happen too much in this specific position, but often if you've got one open file, there's only one smart place for a rook and 7 dumb places. So why don't you just put them both in the smart place? And then when this does become powerful, they can dive down the board. Great. So that doesn't help us at all because there's no open files. So here's where planning ahead comes in. You've got to imagine, where will the open files be when actually things start happening in this chess game? Well, white might plan for d4 eventually, and that would mean the d file. Or he might play for f4. He might move his knight and play f4, and the f file might open. Or black might play for d5, and so the e file might open after a capture. See this? And now this is a good spot for the rook. So you've got to plan ahead about what lines are going to open. And if you can't find any plan, like in this position, we don't know. I mean, is d4, d5? Is it f4? Is it where's black's pawn? What's going to happen? Then at least move the rooks to the center files. I mean, because a1 is not going nowhere. This rook is definitely useless over here, and it's only maybe useless in the center. So bring your rooks to the center. This is a better position for white than this position. Ignore the pin, of course. That could create a tactical problem. But this is a better place for the rooks. So the rooks go in the open files, or at least the center files if there aren't any. So now white's considered finished developing, and black needs to do the same thing. So that's, whoops, king just ate rook. That would be a newspaper headline. King eats rook, and then he suffers from, what's that word? There's a really great word. All I can think is corpulence, but if you eat a rook, would you suffer from corpulence? Yes, you would, because to be corpulent means to be extremely fat, and that's what would happen. So that's word of the day on ChessWhiz TV, corpulent. It's a very excellent insult. It's like, well, you took my bishop, but you're a little corpulent today. And they'll be like, huh? Oh, thank you very much, because they don't know. I love that kind of insult. So the development is complete. So let's go over that one more time. In fact, let's go over that in the air. 1, control the center with a pawn. 2, bring out your knights and bishops. 3, castle while doing that, somewhere in there or right after. As soon as you can, get castled, usually the king side. 4, bring out your queen off the back rank. Anywhere off counts good enough. 5, bring the rooks to the open files, or at least to the center. That's a 5-step plan to winning at chess. Not quite. You don't win once you finish the development, but you win at the opening. That's like a moral victory. I finished the opening, and if you do it before your opponent, your chances are great. It really helps your chess game to have the whole team playing. I mean, you guys are watching the World Cup, right? I'm not. But they're playing this game where you kick this ball around, and if your whole team is playing, then your team does better. If you just send out your star player, who does he pass to? The other star player? The opponent's players? Does he just score against himself? That's what would happen with just one player. So you need your whole team. And even though that's not the road, that's not checkmate right away, at least a checkmate. So it just improves your chances. So play the opening correctly, bring out all your pieces. So now you know how to play the opening. Is there anything else you need to know? Well, let's look at some examples. Now, we've looked at, where's the button that says starting position? There it is. Whoa, did you see that? It was like an animation. It was like all the pieces were animated. Check this out. Okay, oh, the board is all messed up because ChessWhiz is having a good time on his show. Are you ready? Whoosh! I could spend all day doing that. Okay, so what do I have here? It's a book, and it's called My System. Now, it's not actually my system. It's Aaron Nimzowicz's system. But his system talks about the opening, and I've basically just been copying him. And so let's see what else he has to say. He has a couple of examples in here. Interesting. Oh, I'm reading the book, and you're not. Interesting. Whose time is being wasted now? Oh, this is a great chess book. See, this is the modern, what does it say? Modern edition. 21st century edition. Sensory. And what that means is that they updated the notation. So it's not like bishop to knight 5, pawn to queen 4. And you're like, queen 4? Does that mean I move my queen also? Yeah. So it's updated to be e4, like all the normal people write. The chess used to be in this old romantic notation when everyone was romancing themselves. That didn't sound right at all. This is a very, very good chess book. I'm just looking for something that's worthy of the viewership, you know. Something that's worthy. Let's look at this. Let's look at this interesting opening. So we've got e4. So far, so good. I've seen this chess position before. e5, knight f3, knight c6. You know what? This is like the same thing all over again. d4. This is called the Scotch game. White attacks the center immediately with another pawn. This does not break the rules I gave you because you're moving a pawn, controlling the center, and assisting your development. Before this move, the bishop was blocked in. After this move, this bishop can move. So this is a fine opening. Now, because of the way this opening sometimes goes, it's not that popular. White usually brings out this bishop either to c4 or even more popular to b5. However, it's a great opening. It's just fine. Pawn takes pawn. Black needs to do this to resolve the tension in the center. Knight takes back. Now, does black want to trade knights here? This is a funny thing. Usually, you don't want your queen out in the middle. But after knight takes knight, queen takes knight, white's queen is out in the middle. Is this bad? This is like a paradox of weirdness, because I've told you that the queen should not be out here. But paradox of weirdness commence. This is actually good for white, because black has no way to kick that queen around. This is like a soccer ball that's in outer space, so you can't kick it. So in this case, the queen is not able to be pushed by knight c6 because the knight is also in outer space, not here. So black also can't hit it this way. So this is actually good for white's queen to be out here, doing her business, and black can't kick it around. So I guess that's an exception to the rule. You can bring out your queen if nothing can ever attack it while coming out at the same time. But it doesn't happen very often. You can't sit down at the chessboard with the plan of bringing your queen out in a way that the opponent can't attack it. That doesn't happen too often. Black's pulling this queen out, and it's black's choice, not white's. But this bishop has a little hard time developing. As you see, there's no safe spot for it, and if it goes here, he loses this pawn. And if black brings out his knight, white has the option of pushing e5, which kind of puts the cramp into black's position because the knight can't safely go here, here, here. And here is way off on the side of the board, and here is quite embarrassing. So white got a strong center, and the queen is centralized. So actually, black doesn't want to trade knights here. He just wants to sit like this and keep the tension. Okay. There's things in chat that I'm not going to listen to. So, knight d4, knight c6. Knight takes d4. Where were we? Black plays knight f6. Very, very good. As he should. Knight c3. So attacking this pawn, defending this pawn while bringing out pieces. It's good to be attacking, but bring out pieces at the same time. Bishop b4, pinning that knight. Now does white have a problem? Kind of. This pawn is under attack, and its only defender is pinned. So I've seen white make this mistake before. More than once, actually, different players playing white, to defend the pawn. There's a couple of problems with this. The first is tactical. Serious problem, because you've just severed communication to your knight. Do you read me? Do you read me? I do not read you. Shazam! And the knight's gone. So you can't play bishop d3 or you lose your knight for free. So if you're ever in this position, don't play bishop d3. A second reason it's bad is that the bishop is blocked in by your own pawn, and bishops aren't great defenders. The best defender for a pawn is another pawn. And so in that case, the bishop is really passive back there. The bishop would much rather be out here, or maybe here, but because the knights might trade, this is a little bit strange. But this is just a better spot for the bishop than the defensive square. So back to the game. Bishop e4, knight takes c6. The purpose of this trade is to allow white to do something about all this pressure. Because of the knights attacking each other, white has a hard time defending e4. So knight takes c6, b takes c6. Now the author gives this an exclamation mark. Aaron Nimzowitsch is very generous with his exclamation marks. I mean, he'll put an exclamation mark on the very first move, which means great move. Good job coming up with that one. He's just very generous with himself on that. I mean, I would too. If I wrote a big book, it would be full of exclamation marks. So b takes c6, bishop d3. So now white can defend this pawn. Kind of passive, kind of passive. I kind of think that's interesting. And now black need, according to Aaron Nimzowitsch, it says, black need no longer lay siege to the e-pawn by d6, that's castling, and rook e8. Since he at once resort to d5, and after further moves, e takes d5, c takes d5, the disturber of his piece has disappeared. Okay, so this is the 21st century edition. They should probably call it like the 1990 edition or maybe the 1960 edition, because no one says the disturber of his piece has disappeared anymore. The English is a little old still. But Aaron Nimzowitsch is a little old too, so it's fair. So now what the author says is black can strike back at the center immediately with d5. Beautiful. So this is key now to striking back at the center. And the purpose of this section of the book is talking about controlling the center. So there's really 2 points. Is you're racing to bring your pieces out and you're trying to control the center. Black could play d6 here, and that would allow his bishop to come out. But it's not as good as d5, hitting the center a little bit harder. And that's because there's 2 goals. That's because black's trying to hit the center at the same time as bringing out his pieces. So d5, and after the further trade, look at that, the pawn structure is fixed, no more doubled pawns, and black has a great position. So I think the point is that bishop d3 wasn't very good. I think, and you guys can confirm this by going to the internet where all the chess answers are, and saying, what should white do here? I don't think bishop d3 is right. I would prefer e5, cramping this up a little bit, the knight moves, and then bishop here. Perhaps this isn't good because of take, 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 and white has doubled pawns on the c file. But it's an idea. A likely fate overtook the center pawn in the game Lee Nimzowitsch, Austin, 1907. So here comes copyright violation because I'm just going to show you this content right out of my system, which is going to save you money because maybe you don't have to buy it. And this was played by Nimzowitsch himself in 1907, so the man is old. D4, knight f6. Now you'll have to forgive knight f6 because the guy's 100 years old. Usually black plays d5 or something else, but I actually like knight f6 also, so that's all right. Knight f3 and d6. So very peculiar position. You're not going to see this very much on livechess.org playing chess because this is no longer in favor. No longer in favor. Okay. Where were we? d6, knight bd2. Black plays a strange move. Now, it's more normal to take more center with the c-pawn with c4. And this is an interesting side note on centers. We've been mostly looking at the king-pawn opening, which is e4, the pawn in front of the king. This is a queen-pawn opening, and we should have devoted a little time to this because it's important. The nature of the position is a little bit different. With the queen-pawn opening, the king is safer. Because it's more blocked. So the position, it's usually a little more positional, less tactical, less harsh attacks happen in the queen pawn game. Also, you often use your c pawn, which is this file here, to help attack the center. So in this position, c4 would be a fine move. And you often see, I mean, this is the famous queen's gambit, d4, d5, c4. White uses his pawn immediately as a lever against the center. You don't see the king's gambit nearly so much, although I like to play it against unsuspecting victims, because this opens up the king side where white's king is a little bit weaker, and it becomes difficult for white in some certain positions. But the queen's gambit is much more popular, and white's using the c-pawn here. So knight c3, not nearly so common. This might look like the same thing to you, but if so, you might want to get checked for dyslexia because it's a mirror image, and knight c3 blocks in this important pawn. So white usually wants c4 instead, and that's because this is a queen down here. She doesn't mind this open diagonal, whereas a king here definitely does mind this open diagonal quite a bit more. Kings cannot fly out here and check the queen. Not quite the same thing. So let's get back to the game. Knight f3, knight f6. d6, a very strange move, and knight bd2. The good thing about this is that the c-pawn is still able to move. It's blocking the bishop, though, so it's a little strange. Black's not bothered at all. He just copies that, e4 and e5. So we've transposed into a king-pawn opening now. This is as if we played knight e4, e5, d4, d6, which happens in 1 second games when black didn't notice that white played d4. Knights and knights and knights and all that stuff. So after trades, it could be a double king pawn opening. Could transpose over there. Transpose means to go back into another opening that could come about another way. It also means change the key in the music you're playing. Nobody pays for music. That's why musicians are broke. c3. Interesting position. Bishop e7. Let's just play through these moves with minimal comment. This pawn is blocking here. That's why the bishop goes here. That's a fine move. You don't have to say, my bishop can't come out, so I'll leave it here. You still want to get it off the back so you can castle. This is developing the bishop. This is important. Off the back rank is usually qualified as development. So this is a much, much, much better position for black than this. Not developed, developed. It looks like it's just one square, but that's a mile of a difference, even though it's blocked by this pawn. Off the back rank is a big deal. Okay, so bishop e7, bishop c4. You can see white has a lot better space. Black castles. White castles. Diagram 11. Okay, this looks exactly like diagram 11, so we haven't taken a wrong turn yet. I'm ignoring chat, guys, because you're talking so fast, and I care about this instead. So now the question is, black to play and destroy white's center. That's a bit of strong language from our friend Nimzowitsch here. Destroy white's center. So do you see a move for black to destroy white's center? I'm going to take a moment and read the chat while you analyze the position and decide if you find a way to destroy white's center. Definitely a chin stroker. I'm sure you guys are looking at pawn takes pawn, but then after pawn retakes, center is stronger than ever, right? Two side-by-side pawns. Dubious. Keep looking. Okay, the answer is about to come. It's on the way. It's on the road to improvement. And here come the exclamation marks, according to Aaron Nimzovich from my system. He says that the move is pawn takes pawn, just like I said, but that's not the whole story. In fact, this is not the secret move. After here, white's center is stronger than ever. The secret move is d5, moving a piece twice in the opening. Now, because you're in a race, you don't want to move the same piece twice, or in this case, the same pawn twice. I stand corrected, because that's slowing down, bringing out the rest of your pieces. This is an exception to destroy white's center, obviously. But keep that in mind. I mean, if you've played knight f3 and then you're like, oh, I can play knight g5, or you've played knight c3 and you're like, oh, 2 more moves and I'll fork his king. Probably not. You probably should not be moving that same piece twice. You should be bringing out your other pieces. And that applies to just about every position. When I said bring out your knights and bishops, castle, bring out your, connect your rooks and all that stuff, I did not mean move each piece 3 times. I meant move each piece once and move on, because that's how to win a race. Do things quickly and efficiently. d5, and a blow is struck to the white center. His freedom and mobility vanishes and is pulverized, according to Aaron. We don't pulverize very much these days. D takes e4. Okay, so bishop, it says bishop has to pull back. Let me just read through these moves so I don't waste your time. Bland stands better. So, interesting. So if take, you would think, oh, is that a free pawn? Not quite. So knight b6, this isn't actually written in the book. I had to invent it. The bishop is under attack, and this white pawn is hard to hold because suddenly there's 3 attackers on it, so the pawn dies. White says, well, since my pawn's going to die, I might as well just move my bishop back instead and allow a trade this way. What happens? Knight takes, knight takes, knight takes, bishop takes. These trades occur because black wants them to. All white can do is continue to recapture. Then knight f6, and black stands better, according to Nimzovich. And here's why. White has an isolated pawn. Now, this is open to debate and the subject of an entire lesson entirely, whether this isolated d-pawn is weak or strong. But white has to spend another move to save his bishop. He doesn't really want this trade. So he moves his bishop again. And then it's black's turn to make another developing move, probably bringing out this bishop. He might favor c6 to freeze this pawn in its place so it can't advance. But not right away, because he wants to finish his development, because he's watched lessons on the opening on ChessWhiz TV episode 30, and he doesn't want to not make the fastest developing moves possible. So the bishop saves itself, maybe here, and this bishop comes out, maybe here, and you could see how black stands better. You might say, well, isolated pawn, that's like, you know, who's better? But white could get much better isolated pawn positions. Here, let's go back to the board editor and go to the starting position. Ooh, that was cool. So e4, c6, d4, d5. This is called the Caro-Kann. If white captures here the less popular move, more popular is knight c3, and plays c4, this is known as the Panov-Botvinnik attack because of 2 very strong players, much better than I am, named Mr. Panov and Mr. Botvinnik. So this opening, eventually these pawns get traded, and you've got another isolated d-pawn position. But in this opening, white stands much better because he brings out his pieces quicker, he controls the center better, and he's not being pushed back. Compare that to this. Okay, you don't have much to compare, so let's show an actual potential line here. Let's play a few more moves. So knight f3, knight f6, whoa, flying knight, knight c3, moving like a cook. Here, white has to move his bishop, and then he takes again, and then black brings out his bishop, castles. I don't know if these moves are perfect, but they're pretty good. And here, and who stands better? Well, you can see this bishop is blocked by this pawn, whereas in this position, the bishop got out. So that's 1 score for black in the other position. Also, white has a little bit more control of the center here. He has the potential to play knight e5. He has the potential to do other things. He just has more space and more things he can do. In this position, he's a little bit more pushed back. There's been another piece traded off the board. There's a pair of knights missing. Trades generally help black here because he has less space, and that heads more toward the endgame where this pawn is a weakness. Black has more space here, white has more space here in comparison. So this is a better isolated pawn position for black than this one, even though they're similar. So that's why black stands better, even though isolated pawn is dubious. So that concludes the interesting line from Aaron Nimzovich. I'm not going to read you more from his book because Yasser Seirawan, who wrote the introduction, who's now in his 60s, might come after me. He just wrote the introduction. Who edited this thing? Lou Hayes. And who published this thing? It is from 1991, so I was right about that. And it was published by Hayes Publishing. So I don't want them to come after me and say, you violated the copyright by broadcasting on ChessWhiz TV. Take it down now. I hope they don't do that. So in the goal, with that objective in mind, we're not going to show you anything more. So we have another 5 minutes before the end of the cast. What I'd like to do is actually take one of the special lucky viewers and walk through an opening with them. So I'm going to start starting position, and I'm going to play with a Flend. And we'll give the Flend some time, and then I'm going to give the friend white. And then I'm going to put this in the chat. So whoever clicks this gets the free 5 minutes of opening fame with the ChessWhiz. So we're waiting for that. The link just came out of nowhere for the viewers because because of the stream delay, they didn't see it come up until a little bit later. So we're fighting Anonymous. So we're going to teach Anonymous. Now, because of the delay, Anonymous is not going to know what I'm saying until much too late. But for everyone else who's watching, it's going to make sense. So d4 is white's move. I'll strike back. So the goal here is to control the center with the first move. That's good. Now bring out the minor pieces and castle as step 2 and step 3. Then connect the rooks by moving the queen, and finally move the rooks to open files. So if Anonymous flags here, oh, you can't see that it's Anonymous. How about this view? Oh, there we go. Now we can see this. So we've got a few minutes, not very many. So Anonymous, you gotta get on it here. Do you think you're being funny by not moving? Because I'm not laughing. For those of you watching the recording on YouTube, this is being created live, so I'm not editing out the boring parts. E3. I don't like this move. This is called, I think, the Kali system. I think that's how it's pronounced. And because white moves first, he can do weird things like this, blocking his own bishop. But it's generally not the most popular because you're not bringing out a piece right away. This blocks in your own bishop. So I'm going to bring out a piece that doesn't block my bishop, and we'll see how that goes. So bringing out c4, which is the Queen's Gambit, or knight f3, just bringing out a piece to prepare for castling, it would have been more favored here. But e3's not, I can't put a question mark on that move. It's not a bad move. It's just a little bit stranger. So this is a good move. He's leading toward developing, bringing a piece off the back rank. This is a great diagonal for the bishop. There's no other great squares for the bishop because this is attacked by a pawn, and if you check out here, a pawn could block it, and then black's gaining time in the race to developing because the bishop has to move again, and this pawn chain is actually pretty nice for black. So, good move. Now, because I know this is a queen's pawn game, and players use their queen's bishop pawn, their c pawn here, I'm going to use that pawn now and play c5. So because white didn't play c4, I'll just take advantage of that and play c5. Now this is a little bit off the beaten path from developing your pieces. And now look what's happening. Tactical result. So we're going to get some pawn trades here, and we're going to have probably an isolated pawn on somebody's part. Somebody's going to have an isolated d pawn. And let's just give that to black right now. Take this way, black has to take back. Then I could take this way, white takes back. And then white takes back again, white has an isolated d pawn. When you see a mess of pawns like this, d4, d5, c4, c5 like this, usually someone ends up with an isolated d pawn. So get ready for that. Think about, do you want to have that isolated pawn, or do you want to give that to your opponent? Because if it's your turn, you can probably force that. So this move, I don't know, actually, if I should play that right now or a little later. But I don't have any time to decide, so I'll play that right now. Now I want to bring out the rest of my pieces. After the little pawn exchange, we're back to the goal of bringing out my pieces. So I've still got bishop, knight, and knight to go. Knight c6 is a little weak because he's got the center here. He could be pushing d5, so I'll start with the bishop. Now, interesting choices here. Which one between these two squares? I'll just go there. The other one could be better. The point is not finding the perfect square, because to do that, you would need to memorize some openings. I mean, you'd have to learn. If black goes here, white goes here, black goes here, white goes here. And strong players will do that. They'll know, 10 moves, 15 moves, even sometimes 20 moves into the game, they've got the whole thing memorized because it's a common sequence. But that's not something I have in this position, so I just pick a pretty good square. Now, this move is key, so I can bring out this bishop so I can castle. White is bringing out pieces, but this is a little bit more passive. Knight f3 makes a little more sense to me than knight e2. Okay, so now he's attacking my bishop. This is kind of wasting time, as I told you. It does make my bishop move, so the time is not what's wasted, but it's still kind of a waste. And here's why. You're not doing much. I mean, sure, you moved and I moved, but you're not doing much. I mean, was it better for your pawn to be here? I say no. I say after you've castled, this is not really beneficial over here. So don't just kick the knight or bishop here just because you can. You see this happen a lot in speed games, really fast games, where you have to make some move or you're going to run out of time. And so what players will do is just push that pawn because now the opponent has to react. They have to move their piece, and that uses a little bit of time for them. But in a serious chess game, just don't waste your time with it. So this is good, bringing out another piece. I need to do the same thing. The obvious choice is this bishop. I could go check, or I could just block the pin. I choose to block the pin. So this might look like, oh, I'm just moving one square. Is there even a point to that? Huge, huge point to this move. Huge. I mean, the difference between the bishop f8, which is blocking castling, and the bishop e7, which is helping with this pin, which is allowing castling, it's a big difference. So this is a very valuable move. Very valuable. So here White's violating the rule by bringing his queen out before he's castled and before he's brought out this knight. This is a little early for the queen. Now he must be thinking, oh, I can tactically hit this pawn. He must be thinking it's a good thing. But I don't think it is. I mean, queen here. I'm copying him, and this is a safe place for my queen too. I don't know. I don't think I like this move because the queen doesn't. This might not be the best place for the queen. It might be better on d2, d3, or c2, and now it's committed over here to b3. So after I play knight c6, my knight could come over to a5, hit that queen, hit the bishop at the same time. Because there's an objective for the knight, I can live with it being on the side of the board, and then that queen might show that she's misplaced. So we're only going to play about 3 more moves. And then that's it for the cast because we're out of time. But all we're trying to do is the opening here anyway. So my next moves, check. This is a big mistake, guys. This is key. This is why we had this episode, because I don't want to see moves like this. White has a few more moves to make before he's done developing. He needs to castle. He needs to bring out this knight. He needs to bring his rooks to the open lines. I mean, you remember the 5-step plan. Control that center with the pawn, bring out your knights and bishops, castle, move your queen out the back rank, and get your rooks to the open files, or at least the center files. Here, White's not doing any of those 5 steps. He's moving the same piece twice. He's moving his queen. That was not in the plan. So now I can block this check while bringing out a piece. Look, this is dual purpose. I fix the check problem, and I bring out a knight. And then next, I can castle. I can bring my rooks out. So I'm starting to gain an advantage in time, which is all you're really worried about in the opening. And he's wasting his time. So queen b5 is a bad move. But we're out of time for the episode. So actually, it was a great move because it's going to cause me to resign the game because all we're doing is the opening. So this has been ChessWhiz TV Lessons on the Opening. If you guys like lessons, let me know. I'm going to open a thread on the team forum of the lightchess.org site so you guys can give feedback on this episode, so you guys can ask me other questions about what other kinds of lessons you might want, because there's lots more to chess than the opening. Or you can say, I hate lessons, go play speed chess where everything moves so fast, because I like watching that better. Tell me that, because I want to provide content that you guys want to see. We're really wasting our time if I'm doing things that you don't want to see. So this has been ChessWhiz TV episode 30. Next episode will be episode 31. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.